Hello, and welcome to our webinar today on simplifying your Office 365 deployment. In our webinar today, we're going to present our ADFS Bridge Appliance and talk about how we can help to simplify Federation deployments and integration with Office 365. In our agenda today, we'll introduce Celestix and myself. We'll talk about today's identity management challenges and options for solving some of those identity management challenges. We'll talk about Office 365 specifically and the authentication choices you have available. Then we'll present our bridge solution and talk about how our bridge solution can help ease deployments of ADFS. And then we'll wrap it up with our summary and next steps for you to take to learn more about our solution.
So again, thank you for attending. My name is Benjamin Derr, and I'm the Senior Sales Engineer for North America for Celestix Networks. I have a bunch of certifications behind my name. I'm obviously very well certified in the Microsoft arena, as well as the CompTIA certifications. I've been in the industry for about 18 years, and really my background's focused on core infrastructure management, so things such as directory services, system center, virtual environments, as well as the information security aspect, identity and access management specifically, especially around how do we provision employees, how do we offboard employees, role changes, and then provide access based upon their needs and their requirements. A little bit about Celestix. We've been in business since 1999, a worldwide company headquartered in the Bay Area in Northern California with presences in the UK, Singapore, and Japan. Currently, with over 5,000 customers under active maintenance and prospective, and as a global alliance, we are Microsoft's largest security OEM provider. Some of you may know us from our previous solutions, such as Threat Management Gateway, ISA Server, Unified Access Gateway, or even going back to some of our RAS or VPN devices. So let's talk a little bit about our bridge appliance, and we'll talk about some of the challenges with Federation and some of the data management challenges you may be facing today. So some of the challenges that we've seen as a trusted partner to a large variety of companies and really in the remote access space are listed in the screen here. First and foremost, obviously everybody's aware, large number of applications that the businesses are subscribing to, and these will be your software as a service applications. The main thing behind them is that they are disconnected from your on-premise infrastructure. So your Active Directory, you're not using the same accounts to authenticate users to these systems as you are to your internal systems. And that presents a challenge in the respect that now users have to remember multiple accounts, multiple passwords. The question of support comes in, who's going to reset passwords, who's responsible for provisioning, who's responsible for deprovisioning, who's responsible for changing the access within those applications. So a lot of different questions there about how do we actually manage the associated rights, the provisioning process, and all the process inherent and workflows inherent in managing users in our company. Some companies have identity management solutions that can do the automatic synchronization and deprovisioning, but again, those are costly solutions and take time to mature and implement. The other factor in identity management is that we have these devices that users are bringing in, the businesses are bringing into our corporate IT that have no concept of identity. They're not joined to our corporate domain. They have no concept of what our Active Directory username and password are, and really we don't control them, and they're outside the realm of our control. And that's just a decision the business has made, and that's in IT we have to understand and determine how do we best manage these devices. Another challenge, obviously, touching a little bit, is about security risk in the cloud. How well is that software provider securing your corporate credentials and your users' credentials? How well are they securing your data? Are they doing checks for things like failed login attempts? How do you understand failed login attempts or brute force attacks against your own data in there? So those are some of the big questions about that security risk there. Obviously, we're going to talk about Microsoft Active Directory Federation services. It is difficult to install and configure. If you've worked with it and that is not your technical background, looking at it is daunting. The console is a little daunting. And we're going to talk about how we can help minimize some of those challenges there. And then lastly, disconnected services mean multiple identities. Several years ago, there was a study that said the average user or average person in America has something in the order of about 26 different accounts with about 7 different shared passwords. That's a lot of accounts to manage and try to remember. Obviously, combine that with corporate accounts and corporate applications that the businesses are subscribing to, with or without IT's blessing, if you will, that number obviously increases double. So the question really for us as a company, as Celestix as a trusted provider, is how do we mitigate these challenges? How do we really attempt to demystify Federation, make it simple to deploy and simple to operate and maintain? One of the biggest software as a service applications that we've seen companies migrate to is obviously Office 365. You may be moving to there, you may be having plans. Your security department and leadership may be saying, no way, we're not going to move to Office 365. Some data governance issues, right? There's end user experience, there's security aspects there. But whether or not you're planning on moving there, there are some obviously challenges here that can translate into other applications as well. But we're going to use Office 365, and really we're going to talk about it because our solution really is the first step in enabling ease of access there. So some of the challenges around Office 365 specifically is really around determining the user authentication. How are users going to log on to the service? And your two options there are obviously using the native built-in Azure Active Directory or a federated identity. The other question is, what about two-factor or multi-factor authentication? You may be invested in a solution on-premise such as RSA or SecureVantage or our Celestix solution called Hotbin. Today, Azure AD only supports Microsoft's multi-factor authentication, but you may want to leverage your own. In that case, federation may be, an on-premise federation may be the better solution for you. The user experience is obviously a big challenge there. Again, 2 accounts or 1 account. How do you want users to log in? Where do you want users to be able to change passwords? And the last piece is the identity management aspect, the basic workflow of how do we onboard new employees? How do we do password changes? How do we do role changes for the employee? Say they move organizations, how do we change attributes that pertain to them? And then lastly, how do we deprovision an employee based upon an HR action? Either they've obviously relocated to a new position with a different company, or in the bad case, if they're terminated. So specifically dealing with Office 365 and authentication, this is where federation will obviously come into play of how do we authenticate users here. The goal really is streamline authentication. And again, we talked about the Azure AD Cloud credential. And the other option is the federated account. Now, with federated accounts specifically, we are going to leverage our on-premise Active Directory. So in essence, we have a single source for users to authenticate against and for IT to control where users are coming from. Now, there is the Azure AD Cloud, and once you do subscribe to Office 365, obviously, most of you are aware, you are automatically subscribed to Office or to Azure Active Directory. And in fact, part of the provisioning process is synchronizing your Active Directory to there. But the question comes in the next bullet there is, what about passwords? Where should the authoritative password reside? And you really have 2 options here, right? The first option is that, A, you can synchronize your password hash to Azure Active Directory. And you can put users' passwords up there. Obviously, that presents some concern, right? Because now you have this disconnected directory that, yes, while Microsoft is managing it and you can get some reporting around it, it is still outside of your realm of control. You no longer are subject to your own password policies. You're subject to Azure Active Directory's password policies. What if a user changes a password up there? Are they disconnected now? So there's a lot of questions there, right? It is a disconnected account to manage with Azure Active Directory. Again, Microsoft is making some realms and to try to keep it a little more seamless, but it is another account, another directory. So in the case of termination, what happens? How long does that take to actually replicate up there? And then lastly, the Azure Active Directory doesn't integrate with your on-premise applications. So from a strategic standpoint, you may want to leverage on-premise Active Directory and federated accounts to really provide access to partners, other businesses, consumers potentially, and maybe acquisition scenarios. Or you may just want to change your applications to really support federation as an ongoing standard versus native Windows credentials. The last piece about a federated account, again, federation, you are going to leverage your on-premise Active Directory, so everything stays contained within that directory, especially the passwords. It is a single account and an identity source. And the benefit with a federated account is that internal users are transparently authenticated. Vis-a-vis with Azure Active Directory, users will still get authentication prompt when logging into things such as OWA. They will actually, or SharePoint, they will still see a forms-based login screen. With federated account, as long as it's an internal network, hey, they'll be silently redirected and authenticated very silently behind the scenes. External users will still receive a forms-based login page, as they should. But internal users, yeah, they're going to still be transparently authenticated. So from an end-user perspective, much simpler process for them. So let's talk a little about some of the federated identity requirements for Office 365 specifically. Talking with our customers, these are what we see as some of the challenges inherent to implementing federated identity. Obviously, first piece is you need an Office 365 subscription. Pretty straightforward there. Typically, most organizations will engage with a partner to help them to configure and deploy and migrate their data. Some organizations, depending upon their size, may choose just to do it themselves, and either way works. But there is a little technical hurdle, right? There is a learning curve about with PowerShell and how to actually configure and deploy these services. With Federation, you require an on-premise Active Directory Federation service infrastructure. This is built into Windows Server 2012. So from a third-party perspective, there are alternatives such as Ping and Shibboleth, but definitely the best route and the lowest cost route is using native Windows Server there. You'll have two components there. You have the Active Directory Federation Services infrastructure, and then you have a web application proxy. And then lastly, obviously, Federated Identity is going to require your on-premise Active Directory. It's going to require users to be stored in there with valid passwords and the attributes. So where do we come in the picture? Where does Celestix help provide the value here, and how do we make this easier to deploy? And that's really around our ADFS Bridge solution. It's built on Microsoft technologies. So at its core, it's a Windows Server 2012 R2. It's hardened and secured operating system platform. What we've done is really taking the experience of how to configure and manage these systems and put into what we call our Comet Web Management Framework. It's a web-based management portal to configure both not only the appliance and the operating system, but also to configure the Office 365 and Federation service components, as well as ongoing alerting and monitoring reporting, as I'll show later. With our solution, we provide the installation and configuration of ADFS 3.0. We'll configure Office 365 to support Federation, and that includes the certificates as well. We'll do the installation and configuration of your Directory Sync utility. Directory Sync is part of an Office 365 deployment, as it is the connector between your on-premise Active Directory and Office 365 and Azure Active Directory. And as well as, not only does it integrate with Office 365, but it'll integrate with the on- and off-premise applications too as well. So if you have subscriptions to things such as Salesforce or PeopleSoft or any other number of CRM or business applications, it can be leveraged for those other platforms too as well. So some of the highlights about it, really from a goal perspective, or end user perspective, we want to do single sign-on from anywhere on any device. We want to be browser agnostic. We want to be device agnostic. Obviously, there are some minimum requirements. We probably won't support IE4, but really, from a perspective of what are we going to support, and the answer is whatever users are supporting and whatever they're using for their business activities. We have seamless AD integration with Office 365 and other SaaS applications, which you expect from Federation there. We do have custom reporting, monitoring, alerting, so not only the Federation services components, but also the Directory Sync component too as well, which is a piece that often gets overlooked in a Office 365 deployment because typically it's a set and forget utility. The main highlight and main concern is we're going to store our identities on-premise, and we increase security, again, by the passwords still being stored in your local Active Directory. If the passwords for the users are not synchronized, in this case, to Office 365 or Azure AD. So from a security risk component, you've mitigated that risk very successfully. Quite a few security folks, I'm sure, will have a little heartburn about synchronizing passwords to uncontrolled directories, but you can be rest assured that we're going to take care of that for them. We will have access to other web applications that are SAML compatible or WS Federation compatible. So definitely from a flexibility standpoint, we're going to support the wide range of applications out there. And then high availability. We don't obviously want a outage to affect all our users or their access applications. So you would match these devices in multiples or pairs and provide high availability through network load balancing or some other means there. So definitely we can scale out to meet the service requirements and SLAs for your environment. So I want to show you just a little bit of some of the screenshots about our device. This shows just a high level of our post configuration for ADFS and Office 365. We have a wizard-driven process. It's really going to take you probably about 15 minutes overall to really go through the wizard. What we will ask for are things such as, where's our SSL certificate? What is the password for the SSL certificate? What is your administrator account for your Office 365? What is your domain name? And then we'll go and configure everything through here via PowerShell. So we take care of the whole step and all the implementation steps, so you don't have to do your research and reading and get all your pieces in order, and then the debugging as well. We take care of everything for you here. From a reporting and ongoing management standpoint, we provide some features that aren't native to the ADFS tools here. So first and foremost, we have a nice dashboard that gives you a good status of the services, the Office 365 or DirSync timestamp, and then some of the connection graphs. So we can actually pull data out of the Federation logs and say, okay, who's authenticating, why are they not authenticating, or are they successfully authenticated? And then you're able to export those reports for your own security needs. So lastly, about our appliances themselves specifically, we have our own purpose-built software engine and management console, as I've mentioned here previously. We do offer out-of-band management, so for those of you that like to have your data center removed from your administrators, we do offer IPMI management, so you can still gain access to our hardware appliances out of that context there. We do manage our own hardware, so we are high-performance to optimize hardware and software. Now, it should be noted that ADFS isn't performance-heavy. It's whenever users authenticate, we're going to create that token for the users to pass it off. But we do control on hardware manufacturing, so we're able to put good components into them. We have the ability to clone our hard drive profiles. And what that means is that we can do on-box imaging of the running operating system and configuration and OS partitions there, and then allow you to back it off to a remote source for disaster recovery. Our boxes, our appliances are really designed to operate in a headless manner, such as another piece of telecommunications equipment. So your standard appliance features, a jog dial, LCD display, front-facing ports come standard on all our appliances. We do provide a hardened, secured operating system. So the box, you can be rest assured that we are secure within Microsoft best practices there. And then, obviously, you can plug in options like our two-factor authentication solution or another authentication solution, such as RSA, as I mentioned earlier. For our customers, we really offer two models of appliances here, the 3400 and the 6400 series. The way we've scaled them is just based on number of users. Now, you may like to have the higher-end device just for some of the extra features, such as out-of-band management and redundant hardware drives and power supplies. However, for smaller customers, definitely it's a more flexible and affordable option. So in summary, from what I've taught to you about today, what we've really strived to do at Celestix here is really help you deploy a fully functional and highly secure single sign-on with Federation for your apps within 15 minutes. Once you have all your prerequisites in place, it doesn't take much to actually configure and deploy this. This is contrasted with a normal ADFS deployment that may take upwards of 2 weeks or 10 days. So from 10 days down to 15 minutes is really a nice, attractive feature there. Don't require any special knowledge to deploy ADFS to support Office 365. You don't need to go into the console and create your relying parties and your identity providers. We will take care of all that for you. There's no subscription fee or additional hardware software for install. We will contain everything on our appliances for you to provision. We have a visual dashboard for monitoring and alerting, as well as we also provide email alerting as well for ticketing systems or administrator alerts. There's no changes required to your AD infrastructure. We don't require special domain controllers. We don't require you to move users around to special OUs. We will take what you have and just bolt on top of that. Plug-in options for two-factor authentication, and we'll support any additional application integration that you desire there. And then lastly, it's one call for your support needs. If you're having issues with your Office 365 Federation with our appliance, we can manage all that for you as well. So from a next steps perspective, definitely, we'd love to hear from you. We can deep dive into specific areas that you so desire. We can sign you up for a hardware evaluation program, which is a no-charge evaluation of our appliance, and we'll walk you through on how to set that up and configure it so you can test it yourself. And that's part of our proof of concept assistance. So definitely, we'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to email us, and I'll put up our information at the last slide here, and we'd love to hear from you. So thank you for attending. I hope this was interesting for you, and I hope you've learned on how you can really simplify your Office 365 deployment with our ADFS Bridge solution. Thank you very much, and at this point, I will open up for any questions. I see some questions here. Yep. So the question was the two-factor solutions we've integrated. So the short answer is that it's up to the vendor to provide the integration. So in this case, RSA, Secure Advantage, or any of the number of two-factor providers out there. And it's pretty straightforward. It will integrate into both the web app proxy component. There's some assembly files. But from us as a company, we will support it up to the point where we may think it's a vendor issue. So be it RSA, we'll pass off to them at that point. Okay. Can this integrate with HID, Gemalto smart cards, for example? Good question. I believe from the web application side, there is some limited support for smart cards. I know that is they're going to fully develop that further, but the answer is I'm not sure at this point. I believe it's still just basic forms authentication from the external side. And it should be noted as well that Azure Active Directory does not natively support certificate-based authentication at this point either. So one of the questions that comes up is, what are the requirements for Active Directory Federation services besides our solution, of course? And the answer is really it's pretty straightforward. The handful of things that you'll need is a SSL certificate, typically publicly procured, and that is what sets up the HTTPS channel between your clients and you. You can use the native self-signed certificates within the Federation services to do the token signing component of Federation. That's pretty straightforward. The other component is, obviously, from a DNS perspective or name perspective, is a split-brain DNS. So your external company and your internal company names should be both present within your organization and your external to your organization. And what that is for when clients get redirected to your Federation service infrastructure, be they external or internal, they need to go to a single name, maybe fs.contoso.com. What you can do is that if you do not have a split-brain DNS, i.e. the same domain present externally and internally, is you can use a thumbprint DNS record, where it's just a single record that identifies the Federation service and the name internally organization as well as external. So that's a piece that tends to throw some deployments off, but it's pretty straightforward once you understand why. Another question is, from a cloud identity provider solution, and there's a couple of them on the market, versus our solution, what are some of the differences? Why should we look at a Federation on-premise and things like that? Some of the solutions that we looked at, while they're flexible, they are based on a user subscription model. So your costs are variable, and they're going to be, per month, $6 to $8 per user to provide that access. They can ease some of the challenges of integrating with other applications, but in reality, you're really providing that organization, and you're trusting that identity provider with all your sensitive data and as well as your user information. The question is do you trust them to really properly secure your identity accounts? And that's a question that only you can answer. And while they may, offer the comfort there, there are some other areas where an on-premise AD Federation service infrastructure really makes sense too as well. From a strategic perspective, the answer also comes into is from an on-premise application support perspective. A lot of applications that may use disparate identity accounts, things like that, such as SQL databases or LDAP directories, you can use Federation to authenticate to them. You may have partners that you want to open up your application to. There may be merger and acquisition scenarios where it may make sense to open up applications to them, but just do it through Federation. You don't want to set up a Windows NT domain trust or Windows Active Directory domain trust between them. So there are a lot of use cases where on-premise Federation comes into play and can really be a strategic benefit to enable access in these scenarios. So, a lot of folks are really kind of single-minded on, hey, I have one application, I want to do Federation. It does open up a whole realm of opportunities and other areas that can be used over time. With that, I'd like to say thank you to everybody for attending. I hope this was very informative for you. I appreciate the questions. And as always, if you have any further or follow-on questions or like to see a demonstration, please feel free to email us or visit us on our website. Thank you very much and have a good day.